Hello, I'm Mandi McLeod. Welcome to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. In this week's edition, the MAF restructure. Who will be the casualties if the proposed plan to bring animal welfare under fisheries goes ahead? The Green Party's proposed water tax will hit fruit and veggie growers the hardest. But isn't there a more innovative way we can maximise water use efficiency? And is agriculture too technophobic to embrace a joint strategy for growth? We look at how agriculture in New Zealand could become the mouse that roars, as business commentator Owen Glenn suggests. Joining me today is the CEO of Horticulture New Zealand, Peter Silcock, and Tower Sectors Reports presenter David Beatson. In a New Zealand Herald article, business commentator Owen Glenn believes that agriculture in New Zealand needs to become the mouse that roars by combining the best of technology and agricultural expertise to provide safe, quality food. This is despite some people arguing that it's an either-or strategy, that we either go down the technology front for growth in New Zealand or we go down the agricultural front. David, I come to you first. Do you think that Owen Glenn is right?
Yeah, he is right. He's right in one sense, that it is a blend of technology and agriculture in the traditional sense. He's wrong about the mouse that roared, because I would never see agriculture as a mouse. I think agriculture is one of our most important industries, and if you look at its history, its ability to adapt technology to its needs is enormous. You know, this is where refrigerated cargoes first were shipped. This is the place where we had top dressing and the whole range of technological advances that have been applied to agriculture in New Zealand before they've been applied anywhere else in the world. Our grasslands development, tremendous stuff, original work done in New Zealand, now world leading and being applied right throughout the world, probably to our cost.
Peter, in the horticulture sector, do you not believe that there are some shining examples already of where horticulture and agriculture have combined technology and the expertise to be world leading?
Absolutely, and I think it's all about our future, is embracing that technology and making the most of it. And so some really good examples from our point of view is some of the work that's gone on with the kiwi fruit industry, with the development of the Zespri Gold kiwi fruit and the breeding program that we operate, not just for kiwi fruit but for other products like apples and potatoes and onions. We've got some world-leading technology, and it's critical that we embrace that, because that's going to enable us to take that leap forward, differentiate our products in the market, which is so important for our horticulture.
I think where we're really hitting the head-on situation, however, is there's a resistance to genetic engineering, and it's expressed essentially in a let's keep things green and pure in New Zealand and do things the natural way. Well, the genie is out of the bottle in some senses. I think what we've got to face up to is how we actually manage the situation so that we do avoid the horrible consequences of a gross error in science gone mad, which you can do. We all know mad scientists. I do.
I was going to speak for yourself.
And how we strike a common sense balance.
Now, speaking about a common sense balance, this one's got me confused. A recent Green Party proposal to tax all irrigation water has got our CEO of Horticulture New Zealand rather cross, hasn't it, Peter?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, this is just it's a blanket tax, and it does nothing to drive efficiency. It does nothing to drive water quality. It's just a tax that we slap on everyone. It's going to increase the price of food. It's going to reduce our international competitiveness, and it's going to do nothing at all to reward those who have done the right thing already.
You know, I wonder if Peter would feel differently if he was actually receiving the revenue.
Well, yeah,
no,
maybe. Yeah, it's a lot of money.
But isn't it another case of the politicians taking a blasé attitude around?
Why make it a blanket charge?
Yeah.
I mean, every river is different. Every catchment is different. They have different stresses on them. Some are being obviously strained, and some are not. Why blanket charge across? It's like sort of saying, okay, it doesn't matter what it really costs, we'll just charge everybody the same, and that'll be a problem, which I can't see the logic of that.
I think too there's a view out there that that growers, farmers don't pay anything for water. And while we don't pay for the water, certainly we pay for the water right, our members pay for the water right, and there's a lot of costs of using water. Obviously, getting it places and moving it around. But keep in mind, water is such a critical thing for agriculture. Without water, we have nothing. And certainly in horticulture, it's not just about irrigation, watering our plants. We use water for frost protection. We use water for washing fruit and vegetables. Now, we've got responsibilities about how we use that water. And getting back to your technology point too, there's technologies that we can use about, making sure that we're using the right amount of fertiliser and that's not impacting on the water. Those sorts of things that can save farmers, growers money, as well as looking after the environmental issues. But why would you want to tax a farmer who's done the riparian planting, done all the right things, and start charging him 10 cents to clean up rivers when he's done all the right things? Seems crazy.
And why would you be in a situation where you've got different forms of agriculture, like horticulture, where the irrigation demands are quite different, and in some cases they're very intensive water users, but equally they run into very intensive costs when it comes to ensuring that their wastewaters are actually treated properly.
And less of an ability to pass that on as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
One of the things, about this is that in the current environment anyway, we all know dairy's right at, it's at a peak, it's doing well, it's booming. We've got a lot of dairy conversions going on. From a fruit and vegetable point of view, it's tough going right now. With the exchange rate, we're dealing with some pests and diseases that are proving very difficult. So what are people going to start doing? They're going to look for options. And when you start putting another cost of $30,000 or $40,000 per average grower, some of our big growers, it'll be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. What are they going to look to do? They're going to look to convert to dairy. Is that what the Greens want?
Well, that's it. I mean,
and that's a kind of anomaly, isn't it? And actually, now speaking of,
it won't be multiculture, it'll be monoculture,
that's a big concern in itself. Going back to the dairy issue, there's been a recent proposal by MAF to bring animal welfare in under fisheries. And they've also announced that 140 jobs are going to go as a result of the merger between the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry and Ministry of Fish. There's also some concern that fisheries staff will be potentially asked to cover animal welfare complaints in the off-season. So Peter, I want to go to you first. Do you think it's a little unusual that all of these changes have come out in the media in a very rumour-based content, if you like, that there's been nothing hard come out about the proposals to stakeholders?
Well, I think from our organisation's point of view, we've had a reasonable amount of communication from MAF to say, hey, this restructuring is going to go on. And we've expected that. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on government at the moment. We all understand those sorts of things. I think on a critical issue like animal welfare, it's really important that we get that communication. Clearly, we've got a proposal out there for staff to consider and respond to. I think at the same time there needs to be some discussion with the critical industry parties about how that's going to work in practice. Our assurance that we give overseas countries is absolutely critical, and animal welfare is clearly an important one for us.
So, taking that the next step further, do you think that in a climate where there's such close scrutiny of what happens with the environment and animal welfare by our consumers offshore, that anything that looks like it's going to undermine the ability of us to ensure the welfare of animals will be accepted?
Well, hang on. If I was a fisheries employee and was being asked to do animal welfare duty, I'd be saying, where's my training program? Where's my qualification? Where are my credentials for actually doing this job? Are they internationally acceptable? Because, you just can't say, okay, off the boats, onto the shore, forget the fish, look at the fowl. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work, but it makes me wonder why.
So what are we
to
missing
sneak
here?
this.
What we're missing is a sense of an orderly plan to ensure that all of these points are covered. And I can see some problems because MAF's got to actually talk to its employees, and so does fisheries for that matter. And if they don't, they're going to be in the employment court like any other private sector employer. Okay.
Coming up after the break, is it a case of bad apples? The growing argument between Hawke's Bay apple growers and the rest of New Zealand's apple producers is over how we market our fruit in Australia. And ETS, the ups and downs of carbon trading. Does ETS stand for emissions trading scheme or economically and technically stupid? All this and more when we return. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. A plan to sell apples to Australia under a united marketing front is under fire from a Hawke's Bay group of growers who believe their Horticulture Export Authority will not maximise returns to growers. Peter, what's going on here? Why would a small group of growers want to act independently and send apples into Australia?
Well, I guess this is about value proposition and what individual growers see that HEA might add to the value. So that's why Pit Fruit New Zealand, the industry body looking after pit fruit, is going out to have a vote of growers and exporters right now. So people are going to be able to have their view and express it. And yeah, there are varying opinions, and I guess, apple industry has been from the apple and pear board. Someone likened it to, 10 years ago they got out of jail and they kind of don't want any controls at all, or some people don't. But I think, what we should be really interested in is how we're going to develop the Australian market, how we're going to increase consumption of apples in the Australian market. And I think certainly one of the benefits of HEA is it's going to bring the industry together to work together on that, developing the industry.
Now, as I understand it, if one politician votes against HEA, it's going to basically slow this whole process down for at least a year. Is that correct?
Well, not quite correct, but basically the situation we're in is HEA Act at the moment allows product groups to growers and exporters to vote and say, yes, we want to become regulated under HEA for all markets. Yep. There was a review a few years ago undertaken of HEA, and one of the recommendations coming out of the review was that the HEA Act be amended to allow groups to exercise those powers in a single market. So the change that we were trying to get through the Statutes Amendment Bill was a change to the Act to allow that flexibility. That's not just for apple growers, that's for all. So there's a number of product groups that were interested in working together in one market, but not necessarily all markets. So we're really disappointed that Act has not supported that provision being in the Statutes Amendment Bill. That would not have forced apple growers into HEA. What it does is really just change the Act to say anyone can actually exercise these rights in a single market rather than all markets. So it's an eminently sensible change. It provides flexibility and freedom of choice to do something in a particular market. So that's why we're really disappointed that Act opposed that. So I guess now step 2 is if apple growers vote in favour of HEA for the Australian market, we're not going to be able to put that in place, because the Act does not allow it to happen for a single market. They have to control all markets, and I think it would be a big push to get apple growers to do that. So now, it's not in the Statutes Amendment Bill. We're going to have to do, or the Minister, post-election now, is going to have to do a full amendment of the Act, HEA Act. We think that'll take about a year. So even if apple growers vote, yes, we do want to work together, we're going to have to wait a year for that to happen. And that's simply because Act did not support that change to the HEA Act being in the Statutes Amendment Bill.
Now, has that got anything to do with what's happening in the Hawke's Bay and an ex-politician banding together to try and get this group of apple growers in Hawke's Bay to act independently?
Yeah, sure. I think it's come from some of the opposition that's in the Hawke's Bay to HEA covering apples going to Australia, undoubtedly. And
Act doesn't have a grower candidate, does it?
Well,
from the Hawke's Bay?
My understanding is that one of the Act candidates in the area has been involved in exporting. I'm not sure whether they're actually growers, but certainly been involved in exporting.
Okay. But I mean, you can see the politics in play, and it's election time.
That's right, and I guess that was my next question, is how much should politicians be allowed to influence in the way that it appears to be in the Hawke's Bay, where there is a political candidate who is actually fronting the...
Look, what's really disappointing for us is that Act have actually been on a plank of freedom of choice and flexibility. You'd think reducing bureaucracy and things like that. I think in this instance they've used the bureaucracy to oppose this change, which allows more flexibility and freedom of choice, which seems quite bizarre to me and disappointing.
And equally, it was the mechanism that was used to effect the change, or the plan to use a particular mechanism that gave them the strength to be able to do it on the basis of virtually one no vote.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sticking with horticulture producers are being warned that they have to add value to what they're doing to combat increasing costs of production and challenging the downstream buying power. Is that, how much more can your guys value add to what they're doing?
Well, I think value add is really important. We've got a strategy in place, the horticulture industry, to grow our business from $5 billion to $10 billion by 2020, and that's all about adding value. So adding value is not all about processing and things. It's all about, some of the branding, some of the intellectual property we have on varieties, leveraging that, working together to position New Zealand fruit and vegetables internationally as leading innovators in that area. So yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities, and the thing that we're facing is that there's a lot more exporters of fruit and vegetables around the world. As we've got developing countries moving to try and improve their economy, one of the first things they do is look at agriculture and what they can do. And one of the first things in agriculture they will look at is fruit and vegetables. So we've got low-cost producers competing with us from Chile and Argentina and Peru and South Africa and China, everywhere. They're everywhere. If we can't market to the premium market added value products, then we're not going to survive, because certainly our growers don't want to live on the same amount of money that a Chilean farmer gets.
Well, no, definitely not. Definitely not.
No, quiet time.
Okay, recently I had the rather dubious pleasure of attending a farmer meeting held by MAF to explain the carbon trading scheme, because we've got a small block with some trees in it. And I have to say that I was left feeling rather stupid. And as a result, because I don't think I'm kind of that dumb, and what they were trying to get people to do without any help, using complicated computer programs to map their forests and all of this stuff. And the fact that the carbon price appears to be keeping on dropping. I've kind of coined a new saying for ETS, is that it is economically and technically stupid.
I think the way you're being dealt with is pretty stupid. Let me put it to you that way. And I have to say, that's how most New Zealanders have been dealt with since this whole process started.
Yeah.
When we were right back in the beginning of the Kyoto Protocols, who the hell knew what they were about? Except for a few mandarins in foreign affairs who actually saw it as their right to paradise at the United Nations and other international fora, which was fine for us to be leading at that stage. But I tell you what, it's certainly come back to bite us.
Yeah.
So what do you think the future is for it? The impression that I get, the smart thing to do is get in now, get your credits, sell them, because potentially in 25 years there won't be a market.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I guess if you're a forestry person, you can get credits. If you're a horticulture person, you're paying, right? So all our energy, our fuel that we use in our business, we're paying an ETS charge. So, from our point of view, what it's done is it's increased the price of energy, so it's increased the cost of production, and that's not being recognised out there in the market. So from our point of view, it's made us less internationally competitive than what we were before, because that Chilean grower I was talking about that we're trying to compete with is certainly not paying that same sort of thing.
Now, how does it affect the Australians? Because
I think the other thing is, wait, 2012 Kyoto stops, end of story. We haven't got a replacement regime internationally in place. So we're predicating it on the fact that, okay, everything that's here and now is going to exist beyond the expiry of the Kyoto Protocol. Well, that's by no means a given, and nor is it a given that the world will come up with a comprehensive global solution.
Well, it seems to me, and to me, a global solution seems to be more where we need to be going, because it seems like it's all very piecemeal, with everyone doing it differently,
Absolutely.
different measures for carbon, different people getting credited for different things. So, right, we shall leave our ETS there, I think. I think
it's economically and technically difficult. ETD.
ETD. I think it's stupid, but anyway. After the break, we're going to ask Peter and David what's got their goat. Will it be a rant or will it be a rave? You'll have to join us after the break to find out. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. It's time now for our weekly rant and rave. Peter, guest of honour, what have you got for us?
Well, look, my rant is about the media, actually, continuing to talk about how expensive fruit and vegetables are when clearly if anyone walks into the supermarket under $3 a kilo, the best food value you can get, potatoes, carrots, kumara, apples, kiwi fruit, bananas, oranges. What more does the customer want when our
tomatoes
stuff is so cheap?
Broccoli.
Oh, you wouldn't be from Auckland, would you be, David?
Seasonally.
Shop seasonally. I think you're right about that.
And do you think that's actually that we've become far too righteous in our attitude around food, that we want to have it or we want to have it, you know?
Absolutely. People have lost a perspective on what seasonality is, and you know, to be honest, we've started to rely on getting tomatoes from Queensland imported into New Zealand. That keeps our prices down in winter. When the Queensland imports aren't here, the price goes up. Surprise, surprise. It's the middle of winter.
I want to talk it up. I think we pay that food doesn't reflect the cost of production enough. So,
Okay.
David, on that one.
Mine's a rant, and it's about Australians and what they're doing to some of his constituency over the apple exports to Australia. And I think it is utterly overkill and ridiculously political for the South Australian government to impose a quarantine zone around its apple growing district, because one carton on it was a granule of alien object which was unacceptable under their quarantine inspection. Now, I'm all in favour of good, tough quarantine, but I think that this was more a political gesture than a real threat to the entire industry, and the reaction is absolute overkill, and it's designed to create a climate in which we can't sell kiwi apples in Australia.
Well, do you know what I
lunatic.
think? That those poor South Australian people are not going to get the taste of a good New Zealand apple. I travelled with a Nuffield scholar who is an apple grower, and everywhere we went he had to eat an apple, and they were all... So I have to say that our apples are the best. Well, I'm going to have a rave because I got growled at last week from some of you viewers for my talk about psyllid. So I want to say that anyone out there who is dealing with psyllid, anyone out there who is dealing with PSA, any farmer that's actually dealing with anything that's making their life more difficult, my thoughts are with you, because agriculture is a very hard industry and we all do our best, and psyllid was not supposed to be taken lightly. I apologise for that. And it is more complex than what the media is actually saying, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's proving a really difficult beast to deal with, and it's affecting the quality of potatoes as well. So, you know, we've got to remember over half of the potatoes we grow here in New Zealand get made now into French fries because that's how consumers want to eat them.
Yep.
And this zebra chipping, which is caused by the Libraribacter, which is transmitted by psyllid, so it's all pretty complex, but that's creating real problems. So growers are getting their loads rejected because obviously they don't meet the quality standards of those processes, and that's fair enough, and that's the problem we're trying to solve.
So does it actually deteriorate the quality of the potato, or is it chip manufacturers being a little bit?
Affects the level of solids inside the potato.
So you get
it's
like a
the
brown
balance
soft
of
spot.
starch and sugars and things like that. That's really important from a processing point of view. Otherwise, you're going to get a whole lot of brown chips in your potato in your French fries. Consumers don't want that. So, you know, again, we've got to be driven by what consumers want and the quality. That's really important for us. So, yeah, and it's a tough beast to try and manage, and it's the amount of agrochemicals we're having to put on to control that, while obviously meeting food safety requirements and everything like that, more than we comfortably want to use, a lot of our members. So
there's up to 12 different chemicals that have been used already?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, not all at the same time and things, but it's good to have a cycling so we don't get resistance and things like that. But it's proving a very difficult beast to deal with, just like PSA, I guess, in our kiwi fruit. And it's had a huge impact on growers right across the country.
Gonna have to leave it there, guys, but really like to thank you both for coming on the show. It's been fantastic. That wraps up our latest edition of Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'd like to thank again my guests, Peter Silcock and David Beatson. And thanks to you too for watching. Remember to check out my blog online at country99tv.co.nz. And I love hearing from you. I'll catch you next week, and in the meantime, keep on smiling.